anger is one of the most misunderstood emotions I think we have. It's often labeled as bad, dangerous, or really something to get rid of or not to allow to exist. But then some people on the other side justify their anger. They indulge it and use it as a weapon. But anger is just another emotion, and one I think that deserves understanding rather than avoidance or indulgence. So anger is a protector, it can be a signal, and very often it can be a mask. So understanding anger rather than suppressing it or unleashing it like a toddler in a candy store is probably essential to living in alignment with your true self. So anger can be a bit like that guest who shows up uninvited and eats all your snacks, but also maybe has something important to say too. Anger itself, though, isn't just a mental experience. It's not just in our head. What it is, it's a full body response. So when anger arises, our breathing quickens, our mind narrows its focus, our heart pumps faster, we get tense, our digestion slows down, and blood gets redirected away from the hands and the face. And we also get flooded with adrenaline. That's pretty much why we feel so energized. So it can often feel similar to anxiety, and that's because they both come from the same survival system, the fight or flight response. So if anxiety is the flight response, anger is more likely aligned with the fight response. And both exist to keep us safe. So anger evolved to protect us from danger. It gives us strength, it gives us determination, it gives us assertiveness, it gives us the ability to say no and the energy to defend ourselves. So without anger, it would be pretty difficult to live our lives. We wouldn't be able to do things like set boundaries, we wouldn't be able to protect our needs, prevent others from harming us, either emotionally or physically. We wouldn't even be able to exert our will in the world. So I guess we'd probably be the equivalent to a politely ignored stop sign, something like that without anger. But when guided by the true self, anger can be an ally. It can help us speak firmly, can help us set limits and address situations that cause harm. Because in modern life, we're rarely in actual physical danger. We do have it sometimes, but not often. But the egoic mind interprets emotional and psychological threats as if they were real life threats or life or death threats. So when we feel rejection, disrespect, shame, betrayal, or feeling ignored, they trigger the same fight response because the body doesn't know the difference between the danger or just something that feels bad. So anger arises. Not because we're weak, but because our system is trying to protect us from our emotional pain, not physical pain. And that's the crucial point here. Unless there's immediate physical danger, anger is usually a secondary emotion, and it comes to try to protect us from vulnerable feeling. So often anger is resisting and covering feelings like hurt, shame, fear, sadness, maybe loneliness, disappointment, guilt, anxiety. So when we feel those things, anger moves outwards, and those other emotions generally move inward. And anger itself feels generally stronger than those ones. The vulnerability feels exposed, so the anger tries to protect it. And it chooses anger for our safety and strength. It's kind of like our bodyguard to protect our heart. So when anger arises, instead of asking things like, who's wrong? Or how do I stop this feeling? Maybe you can ask things like, what emotion is this anger trying to hide under the cape, under the mask? What's underneath this anger? What is this anger trying to protect me from feeling? And what this does when you do this shifts from your reaction into more awareness. It allows you to maybe use anger as a messenger instead of a commander. So some people really rely heavily on their anger. And in these cases, it's usually because it's their default response to their discomfort. And so what they do is they try to control situations, exert their will, or enforce rigid expectations just to prevent their emotional vulnerability. They might push others away before they can hurt. So anger really is about protection. It's also tied to expectations and ideas about how people should behave or how life should unfold. So often when reality violates an internal rule that we have, anger arises to enforce them. So I say, no, this is how it should be. But the problem here again is that life doesn't follow our rules or our mind's rules. And overusing anger can lead to conflict, intimidation, emotional distance, strained relationships, and also just chronic tension within. We generally will turn into something like maybe a grouchy smurf or something like that who's always cranky and angry about something. So the true self, though, doesn't dominate or steamroll others, though. It can use anger precisely, but not needing to use it constantly. On the other side, from people who get overly angry are those who suppress their anger. So they avoid conflict, they try to keep the peace, they say yes when they mean no, and often this comes from fear. And that's usually fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, fear of not being heard, or fear of being seen like weak or too much even. And when anger is continually suppressed, what happens is boundaries disappear, resentment builds up, passive aggression emerges, and what eventually happens is that the anger explosions happen later anyway, so you can't really get it, because suppressing anger doesn't eliminate it. It really just drives it underground. It's like trying to shove a volcano in a teacup. It's not going to work, it's not going to hold it. So the true self doesn't disappear anger, though. It doesn't try to eliminate it. What it does is integrate it. It doesn't judge the anger, doesn't shame it or glorify it. It listens. The true self asks, what is being threatened right now? Is there a boundary that might be useful to be set right now? What pain needs to be acknowledged beneath this anger? What truth wants to be spoken here? Sometimes the aligned action is firm communication, but sometimes it's stepping away. Sometimes it's allowing yourself to feel the hurt beneath the anger before responding, or maybe not responding at all. So anger guided by our awareness can become assertiveness or peace, not aggression. So anger can often be healthy when it helps us set clear limits, when it protects us from harm, when it motivates change without dehumanizing the other person, and also if it's followed by understanding and regulation. But it can be harmful when you keep using it to replace vulnerability, to control other emotions, but also to control rather than communicate. Also, if you try to dominate instead of trying to protect, what it will do is it will disconnect you from your true self. So balance is about using anger consciously, not just responding to anger. So the next time you feel angry, it might be useful to pause. Take a breath and ask yourself, what am I feeling underneath this? What is this anger trying to protect me from? What would my true self do with this energy? Anger is not your enemy. It can be a signal pointing towards something that matters. And when you listen rather than react, anger stops running your life and starts serving your truth. And you might still like punching a pillow or beeping the horn in the car. That's okay too. That's normal. But you're not actually hurting anyone in the process.